Welcome to the Stop Down Photography Podcast, Episode 9. I'm your host, Scott Davenport. Today's topic is how Craig Ferguson helps me fight gear acquisition syndrome. Hi gang, welcome. Thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Today's topic, gear acquisition syndrome. And just about every photographer I've met has dealt with gas. If you're unfamiliar with it, first, you should consider yourself blessed. And second, gas is that yearning for the next new camera, new lens, new bag, new gear, new toys, the tendency to crave new stuff, even if we don't need it. So that's gear acquisition syndrome. We abbreviate it as gas. And I'm actually pretty good at staving off gas. I've got a healthy needs-based approach to getting equipment. And I'm going to come back to that. First, there's a tongue-in-cheek philosophy that below the surface is actually a lot more profound. Courtesy of Craig Ferguson, it's a fun way to describe an approach to dealing with gas. Now, Craig Ferguson, if you don't know who Craig is, he's a comedian, a longtime host of The Late Late Show. It's a staple of American evening television programming. I'm not much of a TV watcher, but I love Craig's stand-up specials. In 2011, he did one entitled, Does It Need to Be Said? In the special, Craig is talking about past relationships and sums up the most important lesson he learned. He says there are 3 questions you must ask yourself before you say anything. Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said by me now? It's actually some profound sage advice delivered in a very fun and approachable way. And with a slight modification, this philosophy applies to photography and gear acquisition syndrome. The next time you're frothing at the mouth over a piece of gear, take a moment and ask yourself, does it need to be bought? Does it need to be bought by me? Does it need to be bought by me now? It just might help you fight off gas and save a little money in the process. And if you can say it with Craig's Scottish brogue, so much the better. I mentioned my needs-based approach to getting gear, which was well established for me before I saw Craig's Does It Need to Be Said special. It's similar to the Does It Need to Be Bought trio of questions. When I look at a piece of new gear, I ask myself, what problem does this solve for me? How will my photography improve as a result of owning this camera, this lens, this tripod, this filter, this computer, this software? The list goes on and on. Do I just want this thing, or will it actually help me advance as an artist? For example, take an f2.8 wide-angle lens. I'm a landscape photographer, so the shallow depth of field is less important to me most of the time. If I'm doing more astrophotography and really getting into it, that lens might help me overcome some technical limitations I might have with my current f4 lens. If I can get more light, I can gather more stars before the rotation of the Earth blurs them. I get richer counts of stars in my sky. Corollary, if I'm doing star trail photography, that f2.8 may be less important. Here's another example from my personal experiences with camera bags. Now, this is something that can improve the surround of your photography, like the experience of shooting, which in turn can improve your photography itself. I do a lot of work at the ocean. I'm standing in the water many times for my photos. I can't put something down on the ground while I'm in this situation. There is no ground. It's the ocean, and it's going to wash away and destroy anything I were to put down on the ground. So I needed to get some type of bag where I can have everything above my waist and accessible. So I went with this Mindshift rotation backpack. It's great for that use case. It's not so great for just a day trip or a walkabout in a city. And so if I'm starting to do more types of outings where I don't need the big backpack. I just need something to carry a couple of lenses and a body. Well, then you start looking at different equipment there. It's solving a photographic problem, might not necessarily be the thing I'm using to capture the photo, but the surround of it. But the same question applies. How will this help me improve? Back to my Mindshift bag. Why was that important to me, and why do I rely on it week in and week out? I can get more unique photos by being in the ocean and having the ability to quickly switch between cameras, not having to run back and forth to the shore if I need to swap out a piece of gear. I miss fewer shots. As I was preparing notes for this episode, some examples of fighting gas came up just looking around the podcast studio. So I've been outfitting a different space for recording the podcast and thinking about doubling it as an area where I might do other types of video work for YouTube. Well, first is, most important for the podcast, is a microphone. I've got a really good microphone that I use. You'll see, you used to see it in the frame on YouTube. I've moved it to a wider boom now. But I thought about, okay, well, I guess I should get another one of those microphones and set it up in the podcast area. And then I stopped for a second and said, well, I'm recording the podcast, actually recording it, maybe an hour a week, and the rest of the time I'm not. And I could just easily take the microphone from the one area that I have it and walk it over to the other area, use it for recording, because, oh, by the way, while I'm recording this podcast, I'm not sitting at the other desk recording a YouTube video. It made no sense to go spend $150 on a new microphone. And instead, I spent $25 on some, acoustic foam to make the podcast sound better. Saved me money, better quality podcast. And that pause of, do I need to really get this? What problem is it solving for me? The only problem is disconnecting a microphone and walking, 30 feet and reconnecting it. Not heavy lifting. Don't spend the money on duplicating gear. I went through that same process thinking about getting another camera for capturing video, another, studio camera, just to sit on a tripod and not ever move. I've committed to that for YouTube work because the setup and teardown was preventing me from getting video recordings done. I couldn't have an idea, sit down, record the video, because there would be 10 minutes of setup time, and it got to the point where it made more sense for me to dedicate an older camera as basically a webcam. Well, setting things up in the new podcast studio, I thought about doing the same thing. Oh, maybe I'll get another, I have an A6400 that I use out in the field to capture field video. Maybe I'll get another one of those and set it up in the studio so that if I need to do a recording, if I wanted to do a recording of me doing the podcast, or this space I am anticipating using for product reviews or some things where I'm not sitting in front of a computer. And then you stop for a second and think and go, you've got a perfectly good video camera that you use for field work. And when you're not in the field using it, it's in a bag. Why not just take it out and set it up on a tripod in the studio when you need it? Because I'm not doing something like a product review or so forth as often as I do something on YouTube. That YouTube use case made sense to dedicate something, made sense to make the purchase and buy that new camera. For something that's a little more ad hoc, I'm not there yet. Maybe I will someday, but it doesn't solve enough of a problem. And that in and of itself, just the body alone, was like, saving $800. So between the savings I made on the not buying a video camera for this new studio space, and repurposing and reusing the microphone that I have already, that's close to $1,000 savings right there. And that connects me to one more mantra that I use when I'm considering gear, which is skip the gear and buy the tickets. These two examples, close to $1,000 worth of gear that I was thinking about buying, that's a trip somewhere. That's a weekend getaway. That's a new place with new photo opportunities, a new experience. And that to me is worth more than the gear. If you hadn't listened to last week's episode, episode 8, have a listen to that. Photography and savoring it and getting the experience as well as the photos. So when you're thinking about that next piece of gear, think of Craig Ferguson. Does it need to be bought? Does it need to be bought by you? Does it need to be bought by you now? Think about the problem that it's going to solve for your photography. How will that purchase get you better photos? That can be truly, a sharper lens. It could be the surround of something that makes working in the field easier so you miss less shots. That's improving your photography. If it's something that, you're going to use occasionally, maybe consider renting it instead. But check yourself and make sure that purchase is going to help advance your art. And I will temper that with one last thought about this gear acquisition syndrome. If buying the next piece of gear, the newest camera, brings you joy, truly brings you joy, and you have the financial means to get it, well, then get it, even if you don't need it. If that's the thing that brings you joy and you just love working with new cameras, new lenses, awesome. Take the joy. Have fun with that. We have some new members in our Patreon community. Thanks, Keisha, Harry, and Stelios. Welcome aboard. Thank you for your support. It is support from you and from the others on Patreon that make this podcast possible, and it helps thousands of other photographers enjoy photography and enjoy improving our craft. If you are interested in learning more about the Patreon community, check the show notes. There's also a button on all the pages of stopdownpodcast.com where you can learn more about it. Well, that wraps up this week's episode. I hope this was a fun way for you to think about gear acquisition syndrome and give you some questions to ask yourself. Do you really need that next piece of gear? Is it something that will advance your craft? Love to hear your thoughts on it. You can leave comments on stopdownpodcast.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate it and review it in Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you're using. You can also find the episodes at stopdownpodcast.com. And until next time, my name is Scott Davenport. Have fun.